Malay Dalava Kainga. Malay Lamali. Wow. You know, Brother Len, hey. It's great to see you. It's great to see you. You know, brothers and sisters, I just really want to say how humbled I am. Really, how humbled I am to be here with all of you today. I also recognize, firstly, I want to recognize that I'm actually zooming into you from Lishan Ohlone land. Pagwatuhenya ay pagkatulowatu, kamoy pagkafitai kiekay nga Ohlone. This is occupied, unceded Ohlone lands that I'm currently on. It's also the home of our beloved Black Panthers, brothers and sisters. It's a land of great histories and resistance. And I'm really humbled to be on this land, also known as Oakland, California. I'm a little bit off my topic after listening to the beautiful presentations. And I also just think about the histories that brought us together, Brother Len. And it's really, I really want to give a big shout out to our brothers and sisters behind bars at this time. I also want to thank the great Kumu, Kawi Peralta, also my sister Lord Niumeitolu, who brought me into that work of working and doing ceremony with our brothers, our Pacific Islander and Native American brothers and sisters who are behind bars. I want to say thank you so much, brothers and sisters. Thank you for believing in me. Because, you know, brothers and sisters, I say this because there's a lot of shame in it that it took me 13 years to finish my PhD dissertation. But I say that because of the shame, and because I also I want to proudly thank so many people. First and foremost, I also want to thank the wonderful, really, the beloved scholars who are on the panel today, who are an important part: Keith Camacho, Miley Arman, Lonnie Tavis. You know, for the young scholars, the young Oceania scholars who are watching, I know I have very little time, but the gratitude is an important part of you too, Brother Len. Gratitude is such an important part. It is an essential part of our Pacific Islander culture, of my own Tongan culture, that I want to say that during the many, many times when I fell down, I couldn't get back up in academia, when I didn't feel like I belonged. It was actually the work of these brothers and sisters who brought me back up, who said, hey, believe in yourself, believe in your ancestral calling, and come back to academia to tell the stories of our ancestors, and to tell the stories of refusing colonization. So I want to say thank you so much. And I wanted to, that was just a little change of my talk, so, and especially after listening to all the important and beautiful presentations. Brothers and sisters, I just want to show 3 images. My presentation. My presentation is called Tawiva on Occupied Indigenous Land, Protecting the Sacred as Tongan and Oceanian Feminist Practices. What I want to show is some of my research, and I also want to show some images from the thriving and the alive movements here in California, and especially here in Huchen, which is the Ohlone name for Oakland or the East Bay, to protect the sacred, right? And what I want to show is that the work to protect the sacred, brothers and sisters, is actually a work to to fight for our self-determination, okay? And this is the work to protect the sacred along with our indigenous brothers and sisters on their land that we currently call our new homes. So the first image that I wanted to show was an image actually that came out in 2009. It was photographs of Tongans, of Tonganness, right? Photographs of Tonganness that were shown in the LA Times. The photographs were during Prop 8, right? And so let me just read a little bit about Prop 8, everybody, because I know that not everybody is familiar with Prop 8. Okay, so Prop 8, please forgive me, let me just go here really quickly. Okay, Prop 8 was a California ballot proposition and a state constitutional amendment intended to ban same-sex marriage and to institutionalize the boundaries that marriage is an institution that should only be with a man and a woman. Prop 8 passed in the November 2008 California state elections and was later overturned in court. The proposition was produced and financially supported by opponents of women's rights and LGBT rights, such as the Mormon Church, one of the world's most wealthiest, powerful religious institutions, and one of the largest land-owning institutions in the Pacific and in California. The US-based Mormon Church and other neoliberal institutions exponentially rose to prominence in Tonga and throughout the Pacific after the US military occupation during World War II. Thus, Tongans and other Pacific Islanders hold the global record of baptisms and conversions into the Mormon Church, the highest in the 20th and 21st centuries, right? In this particular image right here, I also write, the mainstream media's imagery of Tonganas was enticing. The big brown bodies of our Tongan men, our Tongan brothers, were militarized and used as weapons to police Mormon temples from Oakland, San Diego, Fresno, reaching all the way to LA. Tongan male bodies were deployed as borders to draw lines of separation from the crowds of gay rights activists and ordinary community members that refused the hate. The images of Tonganas were depicted matter-of-factly as if they were true, as if Tonganess is a spatiality devoid of gay, queer, and the feminine. The mainstream media fed us male rage vying on a national stage against a small and Jewish lesbian woman. This image, brothers and sisters, still breaks my heart. What was not shown was the bodies of Tongan women that held the knowledges, that recognized that laity and women are the true warriors, doing the work of Tauhi Whanua, doing the work of Puke Puke Whanua at the front lines of our Tongan communities. What was not shown was the many bodies of Tongan queer and laity and the bodies of Tongan men that refused the colonial institution of heteropatriarchy. In addition, brothers and sisters, what was not shown in these images was the faces of the wealthy white male Mormon church leaders issuing the orders that specifically targeted Tongan and Pacific Islander communities, calling them to the front lines while they sat in the safety of their own homes behind their desks in Salt Lake City, Utah. So one thing that I forgot, brothers and sisters, because I got I got really, I became really, I was so moved by the presentations before me, as I forgot to just share a thesis statement, just a short one, not to get too academic on everybody here, but I actually talked about in my research, I talk about how white terror is a patriarchal, is a patriarchal violence that is introduced to Tonganese through several different contact moments. And so it's the white terror, actually, that I'm arguing, these images that I argue is that these white terror from our colonizers is what our Tongan brothers here are internalizing and also performing. And so perhaps to help my point here is I talk actually about, one of a definitive moment in Tongan history, right? It's a definitive moment where His Highness King Tauwha'ahau I, right? In order to show that he is worthy of this new role as a king that is actually created by the British colonizers and the Methodist missionaries, right, coming together, these types of power coagulate to bring him into power and authority, that one of his performances that he must perform, that he must show his conversion into Christianity is actually violence against women and the desecration of the sacred. And to tell this story, I actually am going to just read brothers and sisters, just because it also gets a little too emotional. I just really also want to make my point. Okay, and so this particular version that I read is actually from the Tongan historian's Sionelatu Gefu, from his important book, Church and State in Tonga. Okay, so Taufa'ahau wanted to test the validity and power of the old gods, and to discover by experience whether Jehovah was the true God. So, he goes with Peter V, one of the newer converts. They go to a secret site, right? They go to what we might say is a temple now. And in this sacred site, they encounter, of course, the Dauhi, or the steward of the sacred land. And the steward of the sacred land, or the Dauhi, is an elder woman. Right, and so I wanted to put up this photo. Of course, this is not a photo of her, but this might be a photo of how she might have looked like, because also in our Tongan traditional cultures, we did as women have tattoos that were also banned and criminalized by the Christians. Okay, and so what happens to prove his conversion and to prove his conversion into this new role? Taufa'ahau does this. Taufa'ahau had prepared a great cup of kava. The kava cup was filled and handed by Taufa'ahau to the priestess. And while her face was turned upwards in drinking of its contents, or in other words, while her face was turned up in prayer, right? In prayer, the most vulnerable position that we as Tongans can take, that we as indigenous people can take. Taufa'ahau struck her with a great blow on her forehead. He had her rolling on the ground. Then he gave her another blow, and raising a shout of victory, called out that the god was slain. So, brothers and sisters, I really want to talk about how this moment also is a moment of internalizing white terror. What we see our great ancestor, and I also want to, with all due respect, our great ancestor, Taufa'ahau do, was to internalize and to perform white terror. The last image that I want to show is an image of young people, right? Our Tongan and Oceania are relatives from Moananui. The first image that I wanted to talk about, and this is all of us coming together. The first image is at the West Berkeley Shell Mound. Let's see, this image right here. It's at the West Berkeley Shell Mound. The Ohlone is the oldest Ohlone sacred site and listed 11th most endangered historic places in the US by the National Trust for Historic Places. We were Tauhiva, right? We were Tauhiva. So what we were doing is we were doing a Tongan prodigal. To Tauhiva this is our Tongan prodigal. This is what it means to be Tongan. Va also is a cosmology that is shared between all of us throughout Moananui, and also with our indigenous relatives here in Turtle Island, right? That all our relationalities, all the intimacies, at the root is the feminine, at the root is the sacred. Right, so this work to Tauhiva, I argue in the research and also within this particular presentation, is actually is also our way for us as Tongan and peoples of Moananui. Our work to Tauhiva with the indigenous people of the land, the stewards of the land, to help them, to stand with them, to follow their leadership, to protect their sacred, is a work that helps us to return back to our own respective whanua, right? So this first picture, this first image, by the way, it also shows our Tauhiva of our Kanaka Maoli relatives in Hawaii, protecting their sacred site, Mauna Kea, from desecration. We acknowledge that many of the Kiai, or protectors of Mauna Kea, are wahine, women, and Mahu, queer. Also, in this particular circle, you see our Tauhiva with our Maori relatives in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We are flying the Tino Rangatirotanga flag, or Maori self-determination. We're standing with the young Maori warriors, Pania, excuse me, I just forgot her last name here. The young Maori warriors, the stewards of Ihu Matau. Also, our circle here shows our Tauhiva with our West Papuan relatives and the Free West Papua movement that are fighting for the protection and freedom of their land and their people from multinational corporations and empires that includes the United States. The last photo right here with the wonderful young women that you see carrying that beautiful banner. Indigenous is a picture of OLO, Indigenous Oceanian Queer and Feminist Organization, composed of women, women identified from Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. This was the response. This was a community response to Prop 8. Right? These were women coming together, refusing the mainstream preoccupation that our Oceania and our Pacific Islander communities centered the colonial values of homophobia and heteropatriarchy. This was to refuse that and to also redefine us, redefine who we are, that we are much more than the smallness, using our great ancestor at Beli Hau'ofa. Homophobia is a smallness. It is a colonial smallness of our people. This photo, this last photo that you see here, was taken at the Dyke March in San Francisco in 2009. And the photo of the young people, so beautiful, brothers and sisters. That photo always brings so much tears to my eyes. Taken in 2015 in our climate change march. Our contingent from Oceania walked alongside and behind the Ohlone and the California Indians that led the march. We were so humbled to be part of the Indigenous bloc. The big banner that are carried by the young Marshallese climate change warriors was inspired by banners created by our relatives in the climate warriors movement in the Pacific, and also Maori women elders marching in the front lines to protect their land against Monsanto and other neoliberal institutions that desired the desecration of the land, water, and ocean. The image of the Marshallese youth group under the leadership, by the way, of Marshallese women elders that you don't see in this photograph, remind us that as peoples of Moana Nui, as peoples of Oceania, our work to protect our Mother Earth is a work to protect the sacred. And it is an Oceanian feminist project that is at the core of reclaiming and remembering our mana. And this work is at the center of our work for our self-determination. Malo, everybody.